Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Disgustingly Resilient podcast and another episode of the mini-series Foetid Fight Phase, where we go through advanced fight phase tricks to help you guys learn, expand your skill set and basically get better at the fight phase. And today's topic, we're going to be looking at unit pinning. Now before we get into this, firstly, obviously, if you do like the content, please leave a like and a subscribe, engage in the comment section, etc. Helps us know that you enjoy the content, helps YouTube know you enjoy the content, which is great, and it helps the channel grow. If you really enjoy it, consider becoming a member, a play green, get access to our Discord, you get some of the benefits. At the moment, we're having a giveaway right now to give away a £25 Warhammer gift voucher, and we also have a Nurgling plushie that is up for giveaway. So if you become a member, you can enter those giveaways on our Discord. Very briefly before we get into this video, just want to touch on the topic of Pariah Nexus. People might be asking, where is the Pariah Nexus video? I am working on it. It's just the game that's going to happen is going to be a lot dependent on the data slate that's coming up. The data slate is going to change a lot in conjunction with Pariah Nexus, and I want to kind of wait until I get a full picture rather than sort of like just putting out half information that could be completely proven wrong in like a week's time or so. So bear with me guys, but I am getting around to it, I do promise. But for now, let's get into this. So first things first, what is the Foetid Fight Phase? So if this is your first time tuning into this series, this is a mini series all about advanced fight phase tricks. We usually do a live example on a table, then I come back to here where I'll break it down for you. We started simple in this series, so we talked quite simple at first, and now we're expanding into more advanced techniques that can be used and certain scenarios that you can use them in to get maximum effect. So moving on to today's topic, unit pinning. So today's topic, we're going to be looking to use our own models to pin our opponents in place. And to do this, we're going to weaponize the restrictions of the fight phase. These restrictions are the following. Models cannot make a pile-in move or consolidate if they're already in base-to-base contact, because the rules say you have to finish a pile-in closer to an enemy model than you started it. But if you're already in base-to-base contact, you can't physically get closer. You are already as close as possible. The second limitation is, if you are able to pile in, you must pile into the closest model. This means that basically if you have one unit an inch away and one other unit 2 inches away, you have to go towards the closest model, and if possible, you do have to base-to-base that model as well. So that's going to dictate where you move to. Lastly, you cannot break coherency during any of this movement, so you can't willingly put yourself out of coherency. The only way you can willingly put yourself out of coherency is by models dying. You can't move in any way that would put you out of coherency. And obviously, lastly, the restriction of the engagement range itself. Let's not forget, all the times we talk about these videos, engagement range is within an inch of your unit. You can attack it, or if you're within base-to-base contact with a model of your friendly unit, that is base-to-base contact with the enemy unit. So it's like 2 ranks fighting deep. So the goal of all of this is going to be to use our models to basically manipulate our opponents, their models and what they can do. In this, we're hoping to deny our opponent options, deny our opponent movement, control where our opponent's attacking, and in doing so create favorable engagements for ourselves and our army. So you'll see now, going into the first example, how we're going to do this. I'll pass you over the table, Aiden, who will hopefully teach you something useful, because he's normally quite useless. Pass it over to him.
Hey guys, Table Aiden once again. Today we're going to be learning about something called pinning. Pinning is basically when we're going to use models that are going to prevent our opponent from using certain things. This is a really cool trick to learn, and it can really help you, especially in close quarter battles, so like when you've got melee and they've got melee and you want to get good engagements. Now in this scenario, we're going to be using pinning to get around a unit that has fights first. So again, we're going to use custodians, even though they don't have it anymore, which is funny. But right now, what would happen is, if my Death Shroud were to charge the custodians, because it's my turn, my opponent has fights first. Even though I've charged, the defending player, which is my opponent, would get to strike first and probably kill a lot of my Death Shroud there. So instead, what we're going to use is we're going to use a second unit to do a pinning maneuver. So what we're going to do first, rather than charging straight in with the Death Shroud, we're actually going to charge in with the Cultist. So let's have a quick roll. So we get 10, really good. Okay. And what we're looking to do, we want to make sure one Cultist is basically touching every single model of the Custodes. So now they've left me a nice little gap in there. So I'm going to have this first scoot's going to come to, actually we're going to go around because we're going to remember our other logic, so then number 6, about self move blocking. Because what we want to do as well is we want to limit where our Death Shroud can actually go. So you can go 6 and 4 to here. So they're all in coherency of each other, 2 inches. Then this guy's going to come to here, touch him. He'll come to there, touch that guy, still in coherency. He'll come fill that in. So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, happy days. Then we're going to have this guy come 5 to there, come around 6 to the back there. And then we're going to have this guy go 6 and 4 to there. And what we're trying to do here is we're basically looking to create a scenario where every single Custodes model has been touched base-to-base contact by one of these Cultists. So everyone is still in coherency here. We're all okay with that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to charge with the Death Shroud. So let's do that. So we get an 8 there. So this Death Shroud can't reach over there. He can't reach with his full base over. So the only place this unit can reach base to base is going to be this front guy here. So I'm going to put one like that, one like that. So they're both touching base to base with this one model. And then everyone else can do the whole base to base to base to base contact. So they can all swing. Now, what's happened here and why it's important is in the fight phase, you can only attack units that are either within 1 inch in engagement range or base to base with base to base. So what we've actually done here is the Custodes will still get to fight first. So let's activate them. So the Custodes is going to fight. So to make a piling move, you have to not already be in base-to-base contact. Every single Custodes here is base-to-base contact with a Cultist or a Death Shroud. So no movement can be done here for the Custodes. So let's now have a look where the Custodes can swing. Well, this guy can only swing at the Cultist squad. And he can't move because he's not within range to strike at the Death Shroud. He's base to base, so he can't do any movements. Same with this guy back here. Same with this guy, because he's outside of 1 inch, can only swing at the Cultists. Same with this fella here. The only one of the Custodes that can actually select the Death Shroud as an eligible target is this one right here. Because he is the only one that is either within 1 inch or base to base with them, which he is. So that means when this Custodes unit actually fights, only one of these models is going to be eligible to swing into our Death Shroud. Rather than, if we went in alone, all of these Custodes were just piled in 3 inches towards us and being able to swing at our Death Shroud. And we've had 5 Custodes swinging at us. So what we've done here is we took away our opponent's options on where to swing and also took away their options to pile in because we've base-to-based everything. So what this means now is the Custodes will activate. No doubt, they will absolutely blender every single Cultist. So we will sacrifice the Cultist unit here, which, you know, is unfortunate, but that is what they're there for. They are, you know, the finest Cultists in the land. And then one guy will get to swing at our Death Shrouds. Let's just roll that out real quick. So he gets all the hits, nicely done. He wounds on 4s, because of -1 to wound. He only gets the 1. We have a 4-up save. We do take it. One guy has taken 2 damage. But now, when we get to activate, because this unit's already fought, we can safely, if we want to, pile in around and even more into combat. We could already swing from where we were, but maybe we want the movement. And now our entire unit of all the 4 Death Shroud here plus Typhus is going to be eligible to swing into this Custodes unit. So what we did there is we used Cultist and Chaff units to base-to-base contact and lock up specific models inside a unit to prevent them attacking where they wanted to. Not only that, we used the self-move block to make sure that our Death Shroud couldn't physically base-to-base anything other than this one guy, because obviously, if we'd have left a gap here, and this guy could make it, he'd have to go and base him, and now we're being swung on by 2 Custodes. So, by using the Cultist that move blocked here, he was prevented from doing that move, which meant all the Death Shroud finished here, and only one Custode got to swing in at us. Now this can be done with a plethora of units. Something called the Rhino Drift can be used. It's quite a common one. So again, same scenario. Instead we just drive the Rhino, just rotate his little gun a bit, like that, into the side of them. So when this unit activates, if we make the charge and we get to like here again, same position we were in. Now, it's not as effective as tagging every single model because they will get a pile in. This guy has to pile in close to the Rhino. So does this fella. This fella has to go there. But the difference is here that technically that is close to the Rhino. And this one is also going to be able to probably get in this gap here. So reality is we are still controlling it a bit better. Two of the models aren't going to get to swing. But these three are because they're base to base with base to base to base to base. So it's still effective and it's still useful to use something like a Rhino. But the real power is when you get the unit like Cultist, which can individually use a model to tag every single model in that opposing unit to control them. But that is what pinning is. Pinning is touching opponent in base-to-base contact in close combat to basically force where their attacks are going to go, prevent pilings, prevent extra movement. And then you come into a little gap you made and actually deal the damage. It's a great way to get around fight first.
Okie dokie. Thank you very much, Table Aiden. I'm sure that was very useful for the people. But as we just saw, what we did is we used a secondary unit to engage an opposing unit before our actual unit. And the first unit we used, which in that example was Cultist, we made sure to base as many models as possible in the opposing unit, but making sure we still left a gap for our actual unit, the Death Shroud in that example, to engage our opponent. In doing this, not only do we prevent our opponent from piling and reaching where it wanted to be, but we also dictated the opponent's attacks and where they had to put them. Because our Cultists were base to base with Custodes models, they had to swing at them because they were not within the engagement range restrictions of the Death Shroud, par the one guy, of course. Now, this is great because it's obviously controlling where your opponent can attack. It's a great way, as in that example, to get around something like fights first because you can minimize the damage dealt to your actual unit. It's also great if you're going to face a unit that can fight on death because you can, again, even when fighting on death, the restrictions still apply. So if your Death Shroud swing first, kill the entire unit, the fight on death, 4 of them will have to go into the Cultist and only 1 will actually go into the Custodes. So it's a great way by pinning enemy models to dictate where their attacks are going in both fights first situations, fight on death situations, and it just really helps you give that advantage. And a lot of the times new players can think fights first is kind of like this unbreakable wall of bullshit, and there's actually different ways you can use, and this is one of the tricks to get around it, by using unit pinning to control our opponent and where they're basically going to be able to engage, which is really, really good for us and obviously beneficial for our army going forward in ways to deal with these units that can sometimes cause us problems. These days it's more looking at fight on death is becoming a big issue, like Blood Angels fight on death with 10 Death Company. If you can pin 8 of them before you get to swinging, you kill them all, then you're only going to get swung on by 2 Death Company, and yeah, you will lose. Chances are, in a lot of these scenarios, you're going to lose that first unit that engaged, but it's much better to sacrifice 50 points of Cultists, kill 300 points of Death Company, and only have 1 guy swing on your Death Shroud, because that's the unit you really care about. So, it's a really good trick. Hope you learned something, and I'll pass you back over to Table Aiden, who's going to take you through the next one.
Okay. So another example in which we can use pinning to our advantage is quite often our opponent will put us in situations, or themselves in situations, where a unit is strung out to take up either board space, deep strike, denial, or in this instance, it's quite common, an opponent will trail back a model to hold an objective because, of course, objectives equal points and points equal wins. So we can actually use this against our opponent because once again, they're sort of spread at maximum coherency. And this is where our friend Rhino can be a bit more effective than the Cultists were before. So, in this scenario, let's say we rapid ingress behind our opponent. These Terminators have now moved up, so they've come in at 9, they're now at 5 away. Or let's say maybe we had to go a bit further away, we're like 6 away. So, in this instance, if we charge into our opponent here with no assistance, and our opponent has something like fights first, or maybe they're just a really tough unit, and this unit realistically isn't going to be able to survive the attacks of this guy here. This, for example, we could even do this with cultists. So let's say we have 10 cultists here. Forget the Death Shroud. And we have two scenarios here. The Death Shroud want to kill this unit and fight first. The cultists just want to steal the objective. So in this scenario, we're going to use this Rhino. And again, bear in mind, this can sometimes cost sacrificial units. You might not lose it, you might do, so you have to weigh up the maths. So what we're going to do in this scenario is, the cultists have moved their max move. They can't move anymore. They're not on the objective, and we really want to deny this objective here. So what we're going to do, we're going to charge the Rhino into Custodes. On a 6, that's more than enough, yeah. So 6 is just going to allow us to drift forward and tag these three guys here. So, now, what we're going to do, we're going to have our cultists charge the same unit to get onto the objective. They get a 10. Okay. So, 10 is not exactly ideal, but what we're going to do is we're going to try and do the best we can for move blocks. So, 10, go there to 10, he's going to go straight to there. So he can not get past this guy. If I just put it a little bit more like that. Can you get in? Fortunately, he can, which means this guy will have to come more like that. And then we'll use him to go there. 10, nope, he can't base. Nope, he can't get around. So everyone else cannot base now. So again, it's always important to look at self-move blocking with your models. So these guys are always going to come closer. Now, if this Rhino wasn't here, what would happen is obvious. The Custodian in the middle would pile backwards into this unit, and then the rest would pile into these two Custodians and fight through them to kill all the cultists. What's actually happened here is quite an interesting scenario. This Custodian can obviously swing at the cultists. These three can obviously swing at the Rhino. These three cannot move because they can't move away from the Rhino because they're already base to base. However, this fella here is maintaining the coherency for the unit. So if this fella actually wants to pile in to there or there, he actually ends up breaking the 2-inch coherency between them. What this means is this isn't actually a legal move because you can't willingly put yourself out of coherency with movement. So this guy has to stay in the middle. So even though no model is physically touching this fella, he is effectively pinned because we've used how our opponents laid out their models against them. So what happens in this scenario? The cultist swings at the cultist, hitting on 2s, killing on 2s. He kills 3 cultists. But in this scenario, actually we're going to take the front ones, 1, 2, 3. We actually are still going to be able to steal this objective because we have got, effectively, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 OC on the point. He only has the 3 here, so we out OC it. And even if the Rhino dies, a 3-inch consolidate without the piling is not going to be enough to get back onto the point. And even if they do kill this Rhino and this guy gets back on, that's going to only be 6 OC versus our 7. Which means that even if he killed all 4, so he got perfect attacks, killed every single one, didn't drop a dice, even if he moves back on, because the Rhino died, so this has happened now, boom, like that, that is still 6 OC to 6 OC, which means this objective is contested. So, admittedly, it costs us some assets to do, but sometimes plays like this, with pinning units, can help change primary scores, stop bad engagements, and allow you to do silly charges. Like, if you were to say I'm charging 10 cultists into Custodians, you're like, well, you're just suicidal, mate. True, to a point, but at the same time, it allows us to make plays like this by using unit pinning.
Okie dokie. So, in the example we just saw, we're actually abusing the fact that our opponents are trying to maximize their coherency. Quite often, opponents want to take board space, so they might, string an entire unit across a large area. This is obviously good in terms of like controlling the board, denying deep strike, but it's something we can use to punish our opponent. By engaging the endpoints of the maximum coherency units, we can effectively cause a situation where our opponents cannot move because they're stuck in engagement with us. They can obviously fall back, but fall back is usually good because a lot of units can't do anything when they fall back. But in this situation, we tag both ends of the unit. The guys in the middle who are basically holding the coherency together, they're the ones chaining it all together, are unable to do anything because they cannot willingly break coherency, and where they are is already pushing coherency to its maximum ability. This means that you can engage the very ends and have all the units that are trapped in the coherency link basically unable to do anything. The only way they could obviously do something is if one end, obviously you get some attacks in, you kill one end off, they have to remove it from one end, and then they can start piling towards the other end. But this is really good to do with things that aren't really going to be threatening killing stuff. I've done this plenty of times to like, used to be like 10 Lich Guard with shields which are unkillable, and they spread out, and then you pin one end with a Rhino, the other end with a Plague Burst Crawler. They swing in with like 2 guys on each vehicle, they're not going to kill it, and then the rest are just trapped in this middle like purgatory hellscape where they can't escape and they can't do anything. And then even next turn, if they fall back, you just do it again and keep doing it to control this unit. It's all about control. And in the example you saw there, we used the control to basically be able to steal an objective, prevent the custodians being able to get back onto the objective by tagging them on the outer edge of the objective with the Rhino. And this means that even though if that custodian model swings and kills 4 cultists, we're still going to have 6 guys who are going to out-OC him and deny our opponent that objective for that turn. And these crowd control effects, heavy CC, we see crowd control, can really help in the game and in the points missions and scoring, because in this example we're not doing it to kill, we're doing it to control, and control half the time can be incredibly important because our opponent now is still engagement with us, which means if they want to fall back and do anything next turn, they're not going to be able to unless obviously they have a strat, but that doesn't work in prior nexus. If you fall back, no actions for you, sir, coming up. So being able to basically put our opponent in positions where units can be trapped, and to get out of it they have to basically sacrifice a turn of doing anything, is really powerful, really good, and it's a great way to deal with units that you might not have answers for. If you can catch them in a position where you can basically pin them and trap them for almost 2 turns. I've done it before to 10 Khorne Berserkers plus a Master of Execution. Managed to pin both ends. The Master of Execution was stuck in the middle, so all the damage was not going into my Rhinos, and they did kill it after like 2 turns from, you know, chopping down eventually. But that was 2 turns of me not having to worry about that unit running around doing what it wants to do. So that was really cool. And it's a great use of pinning without the necessary impact of trying to kill a unit, but just trying to control what it can do. Anyway, on to the next example.
Okay, so one more scenario to do with pinning, and that's going to be that you don't always have to pin a full squad. Here is a unit of Plague Marines, for example, and in Plague Marines we obviously run a mixture of, well, a lot of the time we run a mixture of melee weapons plus guns. So, in this scenario, this unit has a Fight First Foul Blightspawn, which is quite scary. Now, again, we're going to imagine we're in the mirror. I know it's not exactly exciting, but it's the best I can do for showing stuff. So, we have a unit of Death Shroud, Terminators, and now let's say we only have 5 cultists. They've been shot, they've been wounded, they've been shot by a PVC, doesn't really matter. A lot of people will write off the utility of 5 cultists, but this is why it's always important to I never just pick up a unit, unless it's ridiculous odds, because even a single cultist, not only can it spread contagion and do stuff like that, but singular cultists can, and in this instance a couple of cultists, can actually really change an engagement. So obviously, the problem here is that the usual thing that we do to our opponents is we have 7 Plague Marines in this instance with Fight First. These guys are going to charge in, Foul Blightspawn Fight First kicks in, and we're going to eat, you know, roughly like 5 heavy melee plague weapons to the face. But in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to charge with the cultist again first, and there is no physical way with 5 cultists we can pin 7 models. But the good thing is we don't necessarily have to. So with a roll of an 8, we can actually just look to pin the models that are the most important. So we're going to go there. So there. 4 heavy plague weapons are all here, which is quite common. People put stuff down, they kind of tend to put clumps together. So if your opponent ever does this, you can punish it. So we're going to touch model to model every single Plague Marine with a heavy plague weapon. So now, when we activate our Death Shroud to charge, we get an 11. Again, think about where you're going. Don't just go straight in. Think about where you're going. So we're going to stick to this side now, away from the heavy plague weapons. Now we have to base the base if we can. So he's going to go there. And then Typhus, again, just rotate the scythes a bit. He's going to go in this gap. So, even though we only managed to pin a couple guys in this unit, what we've actually done when you look at it is when this Plague Marine squad fights, all of the heavy plague weapons have been tagged, have been pinned, which means they have to swing into the cultists, because my Death Shroud is not within an inch of that heavy plague weapon. So, in this instance, the heavy plague weapons will all swing, easily kill the cultists, but then the only thing that actually is getting to swing into our Death Shroud, even with pilings like this, is just going to be a load of Plague Knives. Now, don't get me wrong, Plague Knives could do some damage, but nowhere near as much damage as a heavy plague weapon. So, what we've done here is we have neutered this unit, not by pinning every model, but just pinning the important models and preventing them from attacking. Now, when they consolidate, they will be able to come over this way, but at this point, this unit has already attacked. So maybe we lost the Death Shroud to some Plague Knives, which, you know, sucks if it happens. Which is also unlikely, but you never know. But now, we get to swing into the unit with full force. So, there's a good chance, you know, like Death Shroud, just roll Typhus or roll a load of 1s, because they always do. Called it! Every time with Typhus, and 2s to wound, or 3s. No, Typhus is still 2s. And then it's like, you know, 6 up saves. So he kills 3 alone, the other 2 kill a couple alone. And there's a good chance we do enough damage to actually take out most of the Plague Marines. Maybe we leave 1, which means now, on the opponent's next turn, they're only going to have 1 heavy plague weapon to strike. And this was only possible because we made use of these 5 cultists that a lot of people will either write off completely and just be like, oh, it might as well be dead, or they'll just go hide behind a wall for the rest of the game or on an objective. Weakened units like cultists or last wound rhinos can be horrifically effective because even if your opponent knows what you're trying to do, this can lead to scenarios where you come out with a unit of 3 cultists like this, and you're waiting on your Death Shroud behind a wall here. Obviously, this unit has crazy Overwatch. They might have to use the Overwatch to kill 3 cultists, which means then you can walk out without taking any Overwatch damage. So even the players that know what you're trying to do are going to be put into bad situations where they're going to have to make a choice that is less than ideal, because nobody really wants to spend 1 command point and their only Overwatch for the turn to kill like 3 cultists. But if you don't, there's a good chance you can potentially lock up 4 or 3 or 4 of those heavy plague weapons and stop them swinging when they actually get to fight first. So pinning units like that is incredibly effective. And the same thing can be said for large units that are spread out to do certain things like, you know, missions, or they're trying to hold 2 objectives at once. I've had a game where I saw some Lich Guard, they were strung out all across, big unit like this, and they've got, you know, the heavy plague weapons all spread out evenly. So in this instance, a bit more even. So they got the usual triangle formation, which is like the key for sort of getting the most space taken. And then, if it spreads out maximum, like this, what you can actually do is simply pin both sides. So get PVC, for example, like this. So if you manage to pin both sides of this unit once again is caught in the coherency trap. So maybe these 2 guys, 2 heavy plague weapons swinging at the rhino, unlikely to kill it, very unlikely to kill it. 2 heavy plague weapons swinging in at the PVC, not going to happen. It's just really realistically not going to happen. But look how much of this unit is now basically dead, in effect, because it can't activate because it's having to maintain coherency. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the models in this unit aren't getting to do anything. And if you know your opponent's trying to like set up a charge or something for next turn, and this can buy you a turn, because I've done this versus like Khorne Berserkers with vehicles, because Khorne Berserkers don't hit very hard into vehicles, especially if you charge them. You can tag ends like this, if they're spreading out, to take space. And then in their turn, they have the choice to either basically stay as they are and swing again, or have to fall back, in which case they obviously have to fall back together. Then like you can obviously Overwatch or Plague Burst Crawl or something. And then again in your turn, you've basically bought yourself an entire turn not having to deal with this unit. And if you really don't want to deal with it again, you can just rinse and repeat the process. And even if one dies, again, chances are they're not be able to swing everything into one of them and kill both. So it's a good way to controlling certain things in the game by pinning them. So hopefully you've found pinning interesting. You can start looking at units like leftover cultists or something on its last wounds a bit more interestingly, and find ways to get around stuff like fights first can get around, fight on death it can get around, because again, when units activate, they can only swing at what they can swing. So if this unit even fights on death, as long as we've pinned the scary weapons over here, or even if they're all scary weapons, but we've managed to pin effectively half the unit, that means half the unit when it fights on death is going to be wasted swinging into cultists, and only half is going to get the actual effect it wants into an elite unit like Death Shroud, which can always minimise the damage you take. But yeah, this has been pinning. Back to table presentation, Aiden. I'm Table Aiden. But yeah, I hope you guys found it cool. Sweet.
Okay, so in this example, we looked at engaging units that may have mixed loadouts. They can also, we have a lot of units in the game where the actual unit itself isn't particularly scary, but maybe they're carrying a character that has a really nasty melee profile and is benefiting from the unit buffs. A great example is like Assault Intercessors. Chainswords aren't particularly scary, but giving full rerolls to wound to a captain who can pop his once per game plus 2 attacks, plus 2 strength, plus dev wounds, all that stuff, is actually kind of scary. So what we did in this example is to understand you don't have to pin entire units to get effect out of something. In the first example, we did try to pin an entire unit, and we did. But in this example, we didn't. Instead, what we looked for was to neutralize the output of a unit. So we looked at where the scary profiles are. Where are the heavy plague weapons? Where is that big melee character? Let's tag him with something like Cultists or a Rhino. That's going to basically make them all have to swing into that. And then we, the rest of the scary units we don't want to get attacked on, can engage stuff that has like knives or chainswords, because we're not too scared of like a strength 4 chainsword into Death Shroud, and we're not scared of a strength 4 chainsword into a PBC, so he can just tag something there and keep it busy. What we are scared of is that massive character, so maybe we sacrifice something like we have a unit of 3 cultists left, and this is a great example of how scraps of units can help out in fights. So even though you have 3 cultists left in a unit, a lot of people will write that off. They'll be like, oh, it'll fail battle shock, it won't be able to do anything. True, more than likely, but that doesn't mean they still can't be helpful. And in this instance, 3 cultists tagging a melee output character in a unit that otherwise is kind of mid can actually make you be able to engage that unit safely, especially if it's got fight first again, fight on death. All these kind of things can really help you out in a pinch to get those good engagements. And also, it gives you a chance to give your opponent bad profile matchups. We've talked about profile matchups before. A profile matchup is using the right weapon for the right job. You don't want to shoot melter guns at 20 Hormagaunts because it's going to take you forever. You want to shoot them at tanks. Now, at the same time, you don't really want to be putting your heavy power fist, plague weapon attacks into something like Cultists or Poxwalkers or Gaunts again. It'll do the job and it'll kill them, but really that's what you want the mass attacks of like knives for, and you want to save the heavy weapons to kill Marines, etc. But in this example, what we did is we gave our opponent bad matchup on the profiles because we put our cultists into engagement with the heavy plague weapons, which means they have to swing at them, and we put our Death Shroud into all the plague knives. So now the plague knives what would normally want to swing at the cultists are having to swing at the Death Shroud, and the heavy plague weapons that want normally swing at the Death Shroud are having to swing at the cultists. And by giving your opponent bad profile matchups can really hamper how effective a unit can be in melee, and it's something to really watch out for because the best players will always maximize their profile matchups into target, because that is how you maximize damage output and impact of your units on the tabletop. So forcing your opponent to have bad profile matchups because you did pinning and tagging maneuvers in a smart way is going to really tip the balance of the damage into your army outpacing theirs. So that's a great little trick you can use, and remember, it just proves you don't need to try and pin an entire unit, just pin the models that are actually scary. Okay, on to the last example.
Hey guys, welcome back to another example with Table Aiden, and in this example we're going to be looking at using pinning in a defensive manner against our opponent's charges. So far we've kind of looked at using it aggressively in our charge phase to make things happen, but now we're going to look at an example of using it defensively combined with the heroic intervention stratagem. So in the scenario we've got here, you'll see quite often, so imagine these dice are a building like an L. Quite often units will come into L's like this and be set up as they are here. Now, what's important is they've done this because they obviously don't want to get overwatched by a horrific amount of flamers, and maybe, you know, you had something else that was threatening them and they want to move out from this building. It's quite common someone's staged inside a building. So, in this scenario here, the Custodes are looking to make a roughly about 9-inch charge, because it's about 10 away, into these guys here. They obviously want to get in here, and then they'll strike and kill the Death Shroud. So, let's roll their charge. I'm going to pretend it's a 9, but okay, there you go, 10. So, 10-inch charge, so this first guy is going to come in base to base, like that. This next guy is going to get to the closest he can, which is like there. And then the next guy, like that. And then obviously they're going to come in as they were behind them. Now, if we were to let this play out, the Custodes will pile into the Death Shroud and attack as standard, which we can, you know, obviously is not good for our guys here. So instead, we're going to use the heroic intervention stratagem with these cultists here. So let's do it. So we get a 8-inch charge back at them. So what we're going to do, we can get 7 to there, 8 to there. We're actually going to try and make sure our guys, 7 to there, 1 across there, so there. This guy is going to come to here. Now what we're trying to do, just like before, we're trying to pin as many of the Custodes models as possible. But even if we can't pin them, we just have to make sure they finish closer to a cultist than they do the Death Shroud. So let's move everyone. So this is going to pin this guy here. He's going to come and pin this guy here. And again, we want to make sure we at least base to base as many models as we can. So something like this. You can go to there to keep coherency. You go to there. He'll come to here and there. So what we've done now, because we've used Heroic to come into here before our opponent gets to activate and get pilings, now our cultists are base to base in this guy, and this guy. And this one here, even though we couldn't base to base him, we've actually made our cultist here be the closer target for him. So when he activates and goes to do his piling, the cultist is within 1 inch. The Death Shroud, however, are about 2.5 inches away, which means, as per the rules of piling, he has to go towards the closest model, which would be up at that cultist. So in this scenario, what we've actually done with this heroic, even though the Custodes have charged and they're going to fight first, only this very front guy is going to get to swing into the Death Shroud, because our heroic intervention has had our cultists move over, touch every single Custode, and basically pin them in position. So even though the Custodes are going to activate, probably kill all the cultists, again, as in the previous examples, our Death Shroud are only going to take 1 Custode's worth of damage, and then we can retaliate. So this is a way that, combined with Heroic Intervention, which I think might become more prevalent and more used, especially with certain missions potentially giving Battle Line 3 Heroic Intervention, which would be great for stuff like Plague Marines, because imagine if Plague Marines did this, not only is that fantastic, but if your Plague Marines have fight first, they'd actually swing before the Custodes even get to swing, because it's your opponent's turn, you have fight first, therefore you would go first. But even in this example, with something like a lowly cultist, we still managed to pin and effectively neuter 4 out of the 5 Custodian Guard. This is really cool, and it's a nice little trick for helping control and shore up your defences, because sometimes like -1 damage is pretty good for 2 command points, but I'd much rather get swung in by 1 Custodian than 5, even without -1 damage. So another trick for you to bear in mind. Pass back over to presentation, Aiden, and he can once again go over this very briefly for you.
So in this example, we're looking more at a defensive play. We're actually using Heroic Intervention Stratagem, which allows us to make a counter charge after an opponent has performed a charge to basically disrupt our opponent's plans. Now this is going to become more prevalent, I hope, because in Pariah Nexus, one of the mission rules gives battle line units 3 Heroic Intervention, which could be quite cool. What we're doing is, quite often in a charge, not every single model is going to be able to base the enemy unit, unless you roll like a 12 or something. But even deep strike charges often aren't just in the open, they're coming from behind a building, like we saw in the example, so maybe they want to string out a bit to dodge shooting. That means that when they make these charges, it's often a couple models towards the back end that are strung out and would normally use piling to get into engagement range and then obviously swing at your unit. If our opponent does this, we can use Heroic Intervention Charge and aim to tag those models that are stringing out of the back. In doing so, we now apply the restrictions of the fight phase where they can't pile in if they're already based, or if they can pile in, they have to go to the closest model. If we heroic to the back of their unit as it trails in, we can effectively cut their unit in half, because the ones we tag are going to have to swing into our tagging unit, in the example like cultists, and the ones who maybe aren't even tagged have to check what they're actually closer to, and if they're closer to your heroic intervention unit rather than the actual unit they wanted to charge, they'll have to pile into the heroic intervention unit. This can save you because you can often take almost half a unit's ability to swing out of it, potentially even more if only one model could base to base you. There's a good chance you could even take out an entire unit per 1 or 2 models maybe. In doing this, you can mess up the thought process and the plan that your opponent put into place. And this is one of the most impactful things on the board, because our opponents have plans, and when plans go wrong, people go on tilt. Tilt is a mental like state where your plan's falling apart and now you're frustrated, and then you start thinking, oh god, that's gone to hell, now I'm annoyed and frustrated, and they make bad choices. Messing up what an opponent thought was going to be a guaranteed free kill can mess up so many things. It can flip outcomes of engagements, now you win the fight, but it could also go to objectives. Maybe now they can't get enough OC onto the points, they don't actually flip it, which means you hold primary, they don't score storm hostile objective. All these sorts of things can have these impacts, all because of stuff like heroic interventions. It's not just to deny damage, it's to deny so many things potentially. And if you do it right and you actually mess up your opponent's plans, the impact can be like, 10-point swing, plus maybe you kill their unit when they expected to kill yours at the cost of some cultists. That's a huge game state change, and something that impactful can entirely flip a game just like that, because they've lost 5 points, you've gained 5 points, they've lost a unit, you've lost chaff. It can really shift how the game's balance of power is going, and give you a massive advantage which you can then try to snowball, and snowball is the act of a small thing happening that when it rolls it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the idea that that snowball is your like advantage in the game. Starts small, something like this happens, gets bigger, but then because this has happened, next turn now you can make a play with that unit that he thought he was going to kill, gets bigger, and capitalizing on those plays is what's going to allow you to become a much better player. And just again, it's all about keeping an eye out for these plays. We're all going to miss them at some point, but when you do see one and you take it and it pulls off, you feel like the smartest guy in the room. You feel like Galaxy Brain 500 IQ, and your opponent can be really caught out by it. So using pinning in a defensive manner can also be achieved through heroic intervention, and its impact can't be understated. So to summarize, so we've gone through all the examples there. I hope you liked them. Pinning is all about control. It's about preventing pilings, making sure that you can dictate they can only attack stuff in engagement. It is all about controlling your opponent's fight phase. It might be their turn, but it isn't their fight phase if you do it right. It's again all about thinking about which models are going where. Charging is not just I move unit to your unit. Think long and hard about the actual small gains you can get from putting this cultist in base to base with this model, but then I can come in with a Death Shroud over here and stay away from that one model. That one model can't move now because I pinned it with this cultist. There's a lot to this game, and a lot more depth than people actually think, and smart plays really will swing games in your favour. And if you can get creative with these plays and start seeing opportunities combined with the other lessons we've done in this Foetid Fight Phase, you'll really start to improve at the fight phase, and you will see the impact and the results you can get in these plays. So as we said before, even like, let's combine the videos now. The first video we talked about charging a Rhino, move blocking yourself, trailing out to then pile into another unit and swing into them. Our opponent's just done that to us. Oh no, they've charged our Rhino. They've strung out now, and now they're going to use the piling to engage our fight first unit. Terrible. Not good for us, because again they'll swing first. Oh, I've got some cultists nearby. I'm going to heroic into that unit that's trying to string out. I've made it. Now they have to pile into the cultists. So now that entire charge, that clever plan of our opponent, now only nets them swinging 2 guys at a Rhino, killing 10 cultists, and now being stood 2 inches away from my 10-man unit of Plague Marines, which is absolutely going to obliterate them next turn. There's all these little things that do come together. So get creative, get practicing, and always keep an eye out for plays like this. But for now, thank you so much for listening and watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, leave a like, leave a subscribe if you really do enjoy the content. Consider becoming a member. Thank you so much to Saltire Games. They're one of our sponsors. If you are after any disgustingly resilient gaming aids, they have an Etsy shop where you can buy them. They're branded with our logo, etc. It's really cool. If you use promo code NERGLE, you get 10% off your order, and we get a little kickback as well, which is great. Thank you also to Vanguard Tactics. It's one of our affiliate links below. If you want to learn how to play the game, take it all to that next level, maybe look at joining the academy, or maybe you want to get some masterclasses for certain factions, check out all links in the description below. It really helps the channel out and see if it's something for you. And of course, thank you to our members. Thank you so much, guys. Again, hope you're enjoying the giveaway that's coming up. I'm going to hopefully have some more content coming up soon, talking about Pariah Nexus, the new missions. Hope data slate definitely when it comes out. Will and Dave are going to be back next week as well for a normal podcast episode where we're going to talk all about that, because it's been a while since we've all been together. And of course, there'll be another event recap coming up for the doubles, which I'm going to tomorrow, unless you're watching this in the future, in which case it's probably already happened. But yeah, I really hope you guys are enjoying the content. And I'm trying my best to get it out to you. Again, this is not my full-time job. This is something I just do in my spare time here, as and where I can. But yeah, I'm going to stop rambling now. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope to catch you in the next episode. Stay rotten, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.